All right. I think we should get started, and if others join us, they will be able to get caught up or ask questions later. I would like to welcome everyone to the second session of the National Coalition of Promise Zones 2020 Federal Convening. This session is titled Overview of the EnVision Center's Demonstration. We have a wonderful moderator and a wonderful panel that will be providing some great information to you all. My name is Julius Austin with the Sacramento Promise Zone here in Sacramento, California. Our lead agency is the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. I just want to speak towards a couple of logistical items. This session will be recorded just for everyone to know. Also, we are asking that everyone please remain on mute throughout the duration of the presentation. There will be an opportunity for participants to ask questions or state comments in the chat box, and our moderator will be presenting those questions or comments to the presenters when necessary. There will also be a question and answer session towards the end of the presentation, and we will make sure that you have ample opportunity to ask questions then. If for whatever reason we run out of time and there is not an opportunity to get to your questions, we will be making sure that the panelists receive the questions and will be able to contact you with the answers. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our moderator so that he can announce and introduce you to our awesome panel for today. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mark so that he can also introduce himself. Mark.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Boucher. I am HUD's community liaison for the North Hartford Promise Zone, and I also act as the Region 1 point of contact for the EnVision Center demonstration as well. A lot of you may be familiar with, or should be familiar with, one of HUD's place-based initiatives, the Promise Zone. So today we're going to learn a little bit about another place-based initiative, the EnVision Center demonstration. Just to let you know, Julius mentioned placing questions in the chat box. We're going to stop a few times during the presentation to answer some of them. So we'll pull anything that you may have and handle it as we go along. I'll try and do my best to keep track of that. Joining us in our panel today are our superstar EnVision Center headquarters team, Ramel Caldwell and Jill Yu, and they're going to introduce themselves as well. So I will place myself on mute and shut my video down so you can look at their faces instead of mine.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark and Julius, for inviting us to present on today's convening. It is a true honor and a pleasure to be speaking with all of you, as I know that the Promise Zone work has been so instrumental in really bringing services in our communities that are most vulnerable. My name is Jill Yu. My position title at HUD headquarters, I am the Place-Based Initiative, the Branch Chief for Place-Based Initiatives Division, which is a new division, in fact, in our Office of Field Policy and Management. Part of that, part of my portfolio includes the implementation and overseeing the national effort on EnVision centers across the nation. I'm also part of the Connect Home USA initiative that also stems from headquarters. So I also work with our Office of Public and Indian Housing to make sure that we bring services to help bridge the digital divide that's affecting our most vulnerable communities. And just to share a little background about myself, and then I'll pass it to Ramel to introduce himself as well. I am I've been with the government for, I don't know, it feels like forever. I'm just kidding. So I've been with HUD since 2014. I entered federal government service through the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. Prior to that one, I was a staff attorney for the American Bar Association, where I worked on policy issues to figure out how do we help our foster youth receive the best education and best quality education while they're in care. when I did enter federal service, I had several different hats, just similar to like all careers, you kind of just bounce around the government. So I started in the Real Estate Assessment Center, which is under our HUD's Public and Indian Housing. I worked on another initiative, White House initiative, to align all our federal inspections so that we can eliminate the number of inspections that we conduct on our public housing residents and also our rural development communities. After that, I then transitioned to work for the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. There, under the Obama administration, I actually helped promote trauma zones. Like that was probably like one of the first introductions I learned about trauma zones. And in that position, that's where I help like really try to see what's the efforts going on with trauma zones as it affects our Asian American Pacific Islander populations. And then after that, I had my fair housing hat on. I worked in Office of Fair Housing Equal Opportunity, where I was part of the team that implemented the 2015 Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule. You might have heard that in the news, but just kind of like putting out there that I've had multiple instances where I've touched many place-based work, whether that's in civil rights, whether that's specifically in cultural to our Asian American Pacific Islander populations, and now in EnVision Centers working here at headquarters. So that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass the mic to Romel Calderwood to introduce himself. Romel?
Thank you, Jill. Great introduction. So let me try to beat that. Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Romel. I also work on the EnVision Centers Demonstration with Jill in the Field Policy Management Headquarters in HUD in Washington, D.C. I've been with HUD only for about 2 years, but prior to that, I started with the government as a presidential management fellow as well with the Department of Labor at the very tail end of the Obama administration. So working on, obviously like labor issues, but specifically on child labor issues. So prior to coming to into the government, I was with a national nonprofit based here in the DC area, working on immigration issues. So assisting unaccompanied minor children, like fleeing from their home countries, as well as legal permanent residents who are seeking to become a U.S. citizen. So I definitely have a soft heart for nonprofits, for community organization and advocacy. So just a real pleasure and opportunity to be here to speak with you all on the EnVision Centers demonstration.
Great. And thank you, Romel, for that one. And so Romel and I will be co-presenting on the overview of EnVision Centers demonstration. And Romel, do you mind going to the next slide? So what brings you to this workshop is to just learn a little bit more about so what are EnVision Centers? And then to be quite frank, I like to, whenever I do these types of presentations, I try to be, straightforward as possible. This concept is essentially a centralized hub to bring in all federal services under a single brick and mortar location. This is not a novel idea. Clearly, place-based work has been going on for years before my time in federal service, years before my time working with in nonprofit space like Romel, especially for instance, trauma zones. Trauma zones is a place-based initiative. In this concept, though, under Secretary Carson, he believes that if we're able to centralize it all in one single brick and mortar location, especially under 4 particular pillars, which is the circle in the middle of your screen, economic empowerment, education advancement, health and wellness, character and leadership. If we're able to bring these federal services under one location, we can help our most vulnerable population achieve self-sufficiency, or at least in my view, give them the best shot of achieving whatever goals that they want to obtain. Now, the demonstration is, I would say, I like to point out an example of how this is novel, but if you think about it, right, if you are trying to seek federal service, I like to use the example of Social Security. Social Security Administration has hundreds of field offices located across the state. And quite biasedly, I like using Social Security because my husband works there. So I like to kind of ping him on this one. But so SSA has several field offices across the state. But if you're looking for federal services, you got to go to their field office. What if you're also seeking Department of Labor work-related services, like where Ramel came from? Then I would have to go to a work source center, which might be located elsewhere. What if you're also looking for housing counseling services? You would probably have to go to an approved housing counseling agency located elsewhere. And if you had to geo-map these and place it and have an overlay on a map, you'll probably notice that they're not centrally located. They're probably miles apart. And somebody who needs to take time off of work, who has to rely on childcare, it could be incredibly taxing to find these 3 separate services just for help. Now, under an EnVision Center demonstration, as well as promise zones and everything else before us, if we're able to line this up, we give that individual the best chance that they can get, and also maximizing and making it much as efficient and effective as possible for them to get the help that they need. The demonstration is actually unfunded. There is no money attached to being an EnVision Center site. We are literally just leveraging existing federal programming and just seeing where we can align so that we're no longer going to a separate SSA field office, a work source center field office, as well as a housing finance. How can we bring all of those together? One benefit of becoming an EnVision Center site, like as we promote, is when you apply for designation, any organization is open to apply as long as they embody the 4 pillars. Once they apply, they will receive a HUD appointed staff member to be in some sense, a community liaison, like somebody who will liaise directly with the federal government. That individual, I'm sure you know, the federal government is complicated. It's difficult to find programming, and it's difficult to find the right person in the right office to even get your questions answered. With a HUD appointed staff member from our field staff, we like to call them site leads. This individual, this site lead, would be that conduit, would be that person who can, okay, EnVision Center site, these are the issues and challenges that you're encountering. Let me see if I can introduce you to a new federal office and help you bridge that network. Let me pause right there real quick. Ramel, feel free to jump in whenever. Okay. So the next slide, please. So the start of the EnVision Center demonstration started back in December 2017. The Secretary Carson issued a notice in the Federal Register announcing this idea, and essentially announcing this idea to see who in the nation embodies the concept of EnVision Centers. Back then, they were able to find 18 separate organizations. One of them is Hartford, which is a promise zone, who embodies the spirit of, I am a centralized hub and I embody the 4 pillars where I offer services under each of those. Since then, we promoted a demonstration, reached out to our federal partners, essentially doing this type of work, what I'm doing right now. As of August, what day is it? As of today, August 20th, we've grown from 18 EnVision Center sites to 52. So we were able to identify a total of 52 organizations who raised their hand and said, I am a site that have centralized services and could really benefit from having a site lead to help me enhance the work that I do in communities. Next slide, please. So this map, which is just a static map that you're seeing, but if you go to the website in the bottom left corner of this slide, HUD.gov/EnVision Centers, you will see this map and it's interactive. You can actually hover over each blue and green circle, and then you can find the address and actually zoom in and see where they're specifically located. These are where all our EnVision Center sites are located. The red star shows where the overlay is, like where does trauma zones and EnVision Centers, where do we intersect? And you'll see I mentioned Hartford, which is on the top right corner. And of course, on the bottom left, you see San Antonio, bottom left, San Diego and Sacramento. So there's places where we have some intersection for sure. Like I mentioned, that we are at 52 EnVision Center sites, and we expect to grow to hopefully maybe 80 by the end of the calendar year, but we are growing and we are always looking to invite like more Promise Zone partners and other place-based initiatives to work with us to help expand both of our work. Next slide, please. So here are our regional administrators. These are appointed by Secretary Carson. We included a slide in here because it also shows how our HUD regions are pretty much sliced across the nation, in case you're not familiar with how HUD is located, but I think you guys are at this point. EnVision Centers, of course, while I oversee it in the headquarters and at the national level, because it's a place-based work, the work is done by the local connections. And so therefore the regional administrators and their local team, we rely on them to really make that network, really introduce, like, if these are your challenges, let me introduce you to a federal partner at the local level who can help you solve those challenges with you. Next slide, please. And this is a little snapshot of where we are at with our EnVision centers. We are at 52, as I mentioned, and we've engaged with 22 different federal partners and 9 national nonprofits. So of the 22 federal partners, Secretary Carson sent out a memo. He's the chair of the White House Opportunity Revitalization Council, as you might be familiar with, which is overseeing the Opportunity Zones initiative. He invited his cabinet secretary colleagues to, for the purposes of advancing opportunity zones, also work with EnVision centers so that we can also bring self-sufficiency and economic opportunity to the communities we serve. Next slide. And here we have a slide, and the next 2 slides actually are just samples of what we've done to bring EnVision centers and federal partners to the fold. So here, when we promoted and introduced what the demonstration is to different federal partners, we asked them point blankly, do you have programming that can benefit the communities that our EnVision centers serve? And many of them, of course, raised their hands. Some of them even pointed that we actually have prior partnerships with HUD and prior MOUs. Let's leverage those prior partnerships and see what we can bring programming to the site. So for instance, the FDIC, which is a Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, they offer a financial literacy program. And we said, you know what, let's see if we can introduce financial literacy training programs at your EnVision Center site. Of course, you know, some of this is done online, so a lot of it had to be done, like, you know, kind of in coordination with the virtual and like the digital access. But we were able to introduce some financial literacy education to our site. In the next slide, please. And this slide also shows, like, you know, further additions of what we're trying to do in co-aligning our federal services. So the bottom left, you see IRS, we have Social Security, like I mentioned. Under the Social Security Administration, we're actually trying to launch a pilot with them. SSA field offices, when they were open, were very overly taxed. They were, they shared with us that it's very difficult for their field staff to respond to the need. And so we offered, well, how do we leverage EnVision Center sites so that we can help you respond to the clients in a more effective and efficient manner. And so right now we're trying to introduce a video conferencing service at the EnVision Center site, where SSA will loan us the video conferencing equipment, actually loan the EnVision Center site. We introduced that partnership, so it's really up to them, and have that video conferencing equipment available at the EnVision Center site. And then any client, while they're there, they can get education resources, job training resources, and also SSA benefit information while they're at the EnVision Center site. Next slide.
Oh, Jill, do you want to pause for questions?
Oh, yes, please. Happy to.
Sure. So, Jill, I was wondering, you had mentioned about the site leads, HUD staff that are assigned to the EnVision centers. Are you able to elaborate, or Ramel, either one of you, to elaborate on the type of assistance that the site leads provide and kind of go through their role? I know we talked about them as liaisons, but just maybe elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, actually, I'll pitch it to Ramel because I know Ramel's been working so closely with many of our site leads. Ramel, do you mind sharing a little bit of like some sample things that our site leads have done to build our EnVision Center's capacity?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark and Jill. Our site leads definitely, meet with their dedicated EnVision Center or EnVision Centers in some cases, at least once every 2 weeks. So right now, because of the pandemic and a lot of like stay-at-home orders, a lot of those meetings are done remotely. So it can be done by phone or by by video chat such as Teams. But in the past, like they were meeting with them in person, to just really provide them that technical assistance, that hand-holding, to assist them on, for example, the AmeriCorps Vista applications, like setting up like federal roundtables. So things like that is like acting as a bridge for the EnVision Center or EnVision Centers, if there's a cluster of them in a particular community, to the federal government, because it is very intimidating and confusing, to try to navigate, the government landscape as you all are, familiar with. And so, the role of our site leads in FPM is really to just, provide that bridge, between the EnVision Center and the community and to the federal partners that, that we have been able to secure and work with.
And I'll just add in there, so similar to what we're doing today with this national convening for promise zones, so or EnVision Centers, as Ramel mentioned, our site leads and our regional points of contact, if they deem appropriate, will host smaller regional federal convenings. And what Ramel mentioned, a recent one that I would love to just give a shout out to our field staff who are located in Region 3, which is Virginia, Maryland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. They recently held a roundtable for the EnVision Center sites located in Virginia, and that garnered a lot of attention. So they held literally, I think it was on a Microsoft Teams platform similar to Zoom, and they invited USDA, Department of Labor, Department of Justice, Department of Education to this roundtable. And it was also very intentional. Like, we're just not inviting federal partners left and right just for the sake of showing off what the EnVision Center demonstration is. It was purely based on these Virginia sites. They identified needs in their communities that they struggled to respond to. So for instance, the reason why Department of Justice was invited was because there was just a difficulty with responding to those who recently left prison. And so how can we connect with DOJ to help figure out like what are the services that they're offering and grant opportunities to help the Virginia EnVision Center sites, just help enhance their services. Similarly with USDA, we have an interest to advance more urban agriculture programming, and USDA just set up their urban agriculture programming. So how can they introduce their programs to our Virginia sites? So anyways, the federal roundtables are another conduit, another way to respond and help introduce more programming to the EnVision Center sites.
And I would just add to that I think having a site lead, from FPM, from HUD, in a place-based initiative makes a lot of sense because oftentimes the site lead is from that community. Like they know, who are like the community stakeholders. They know the needs of, the EnVision Center. Like they know, how to bridge those two resources, those resources to the EnVision Center that they're working with, as opposed to it coming from HUD headquarters where, we're not going to be as familiar with that community. So just having a dedicated site lead from HUD, definitely makes sense for any place-based initiative.
Thank you both for that. I have a few more questions for you. Could you possibly highlight one or two of the national nonprofits that you mentioned that are working with the EnVision Centers currently?
Yes, we can. So one nonprofit that just recently, I would say, has entered the fold, maybe not like the last couple of months, is, oh, I hope I don't butcher this name. I always kind of trip on it. It's the National Center for Health in Public Housing. So the National Center for Health and Public Housing, and I'm going to drop their link here because they have a dynamic map on where their members are located, but we partnered with them because they serve public housing residents. And then when they learned about the EnVision Center's demonstration, they wanted to see how can we introduce their members, which are mostly qualified health centers, to the EnVision Center's clients? Or is there a way for the qualified health centers to partner with EnVision Centers? Right now, we're actually in preliminary stages to see how can we leverage the members, the qualified health centers, with their vaccinations and immunization efforts and have them offered at the EnVision Center sites. And the reason why we're pushing on this one is because, of course, we are in a pandemic and flu season is upon us. And so there is this urgency to make sure that our most vulnerable populations have access to these vaccinations, whether it's at the qualified health center or actually at the EnVision Center sites. Either way, the more opportunities to offer these vaccinations, the better. And Romel, I don't know, do you have another nonprofit that's at the top of your head that you want to highlight?
Yeah, so definitely the ABC Mouse organization. I think that's a really great resource. So it's a company that has been very willing to partner with us for the PHAs, for the public housing authorities, to provide an online educational resource for children who live on site. And they extended the service for free to our EnVision centers. So many of our EnVision centers are public housing authorities, but some of them aren't. And so we were able to get free access to those EnVision centers that didn't already have access. And that's in a similar format as like a Khan Academy, where you can get like a very friendly looking mouse that guides the student or the child to go through their academic resources. And it's a free resource for them as long as they are affiliated as an EnVision center.
Thank you. I have a question from Paula Randler, who is the program manager for urban and community forestry in the southern region of the U.S. Forest Service, from Texas to Virginia, covering a total of 13 states. Paula's question is, what opportunities are there to expand the partnership to get involved?
Oh, there are plenty. So Romel, do you mind toggling back to the map? So first of all, I'm thankful for the question, and I'm so glad that you're interested in seeing where can we further solidify the partnership. So first of all, if you are in an organization or represent or know of an organization that embodies the EnVision Center demonstration, you're definitely welcome to apply for designation if that interests you. If you are just looking to partner with an EnVision Center site, the best place to go to is, of course, check out our map to see where we are co-located and see if there is an EnVision Center site in close proximity to you. Or if you're a national organization, we can definitely entertain how can we do a more centralized and more localized approach. I would then probably, if you want to do a follow-up after that, we can connect you with our HUD regional points of contact, such as Mark, who is our moderator. He can then introduce you to what the local EnVision centers in his region and how those needs can work with whatever your organization is trying to offer. Oh, and it sounds, I'm looking at the chat, it says you are part of USDA. And Paula, I'm not sure which part of USDA, if you mind dropping that in the chat. We've actually been in talks with your USDA's Office of Public Partnership. I'm always butchering these names because, of course, in the government, there's so many HUD speak, or excuse me, federal speak. I'm in contact with their Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement, as well as your USDA's NRCS, which is a National Resource Conservation Service. So I'm in partnership with both of them, but I would love to connect with you, Paula, afterwards. It'd be great.
And I would just add that actually, as Jill had said earlier, we do have additional EnVision centers that are in the pipeline for designation. So many of them are actually in Texas and also Oklahoma. So, you'll definitely be able to see this more, more sites will be added, very soon as those new EnVision centers receive designation.
Okay, I think if you want to continue, we can do some more questions after.
Great. And I'll pass the mic actually to Ramel. Ramel, do you want to jump in here showing like the next 2 or 3 slides?
Sure, thank you. Oops. Okay, so the next slide is just showing some of our federal partners in action. So many of them, from Department of Labor, from Treasury, from CFPB, which is a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, have really provided like tangible services on site at our EnVision centers or like remotely, due to the pandemic. And so the first picture of here is from our Spokane EnVision Center located in Spokane, Washington. So you can see actually a tour that was being given to our like federal partners. So we had about 20 or so representatives from across the government, from the Pacific Northwest to DC, who flew in to actually see this EnVision Center, which is what we call one of our premier EnVision Center. It's a premier EnVision Center because it does provide all the services under one roof, everything from employment assistance to housing assistance, to I think counseling services as well. And so it's very easy for somebody to be able to get what they need under one roof instead of having to travel to multiple locations. And this was our first federal roundtable. Unfortunately, we weren't able to host another one because of the pandemic, but we're hoping to do another one in the future. And then the second picture is of our Consumer Financial Protection Bureau partner providing a financial literacy in San Diego at the Metro Career EnVision Center. So them, as well as the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, like they've been very instrumental in providing their trainings, so in person, online, to help the EnVision centers train their staff as well as train the clients on how to just manage like basic literacy, like financial literacy, including balancing a checkbook, things like that. And then the third picture to the right is some donated grocery bags from the Census Bureau, which provided these bags for various food drives, especially during the pandemic. Like they were very instrumental in just providing this resource, at a time when a lot of our EnVision centers were doing food drives and also donating groceries to individuals like needing them, while also providing them information materials on how to actually submit the census materials in order to be counted for the 2020 census. And then the next slide is just some of our activities from several of our EnVision centers. So the first one is from Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is from our first cohort. So the original 18 that we had mentioned earlier. So this just shows them in action. So obviously this is Secretary Carson like visiting their woodworking shop, as well as a mobile grocery store, which is, I believe, on site, but it also travels across the community, just providing like needed food and groceries to people in the community who are in need of those, as well as a after-school tutoring session. As you can see here, there's a computer lab on site, and several of the students who are actually engaged. I have not had the pleasure to visit this site, but Jill has. So I'm not sure if she wants to, just talk a little bit.
I'll just jump. Sure, thanks, Ramel. So we like to use this slide mostly because it just shows that we're honoring the existing efforts and engagements that the Bowling Green EnVision Center site has been doing for, for years prior to receiving designation. But what we've committed to them is we honor and respect that you offer these services, but we want to do everything that we can to enhance how you serve the community. So like Ramel said, These are just images that show like how they are fulfilling each part of the pillar under the demonstration. And then next slide, Ramel. And then here's another one we like to highlight, Hartford as well. It's just like another example of these are the services that they are offering to the EnVision Center. Some of it, of course, is not by our doing at HUD, but because they are embodying like the concept of the demonstration. We want to support them and we want to do our best to like really enhance their work. In fact, I think a lot of the ways that they were able to secure this servicing or to secure a lot of this programming is because of the Promise Zone work. And we're just kind of like leveraging how can your existing Promise Zone relationships and how can our EnVision Center relationships, how can we bring that together for the benefit of Hartford, Connecticut. Next slide, Ramel. And then this one is another, like Ramel said, we touch on that picture of Spokane, Washington. They were a unique site. In fact, when they heard about the EnVision Center demonstration, they did not have an existing location, but they pulled together their partners and decided we want to become a one-stop shop. And so they established themselves as a Spokane resource center by providing these types of services at their site. And since then, we've also introduced more services to enhance their engagement with the community.
Yeah,
Next.
I would just add for this, so for this EnVision Center, so as I said, most of our site leads, are like providing services, providing technical assistance on a bi-weekly basis. But in the Spokane EnVision Center, it's a very unique setup because we actually do have our site lead there in person, at least like 3 times a week, I believe. And so this was prior to the pandemic, but she would actually be at the EnVision Center in person and providing that assistance face to face. And that worked out because she actually is from the community, so she is, more in tune with what the Spokane community needs, as well as what services are out there. And so I believe really the success of their EnVision Center is due really to our site lead being on site and providing that face-to-face interaction and services.
Next slide. And of course, and Ramel and I, we both mentioned a few times that, of course, we are in the middle of a pandemic. This just shows examples of what our EnVision Center sites have done in response to the pandemic. Some of them had to close their doors, unfortunately, like many of us, because of state orders or local orders or whatever the reason. But then there were those that were considered essential and they were allowed to stay open. And as such, they were able to continue the work that doing, and as well as being a little bit more innovative. So for instance, on the top left, we mentioned Bowling Green, Kentucky EnVision Center site already has a mobile grocery store. They retrofitted like this old school bus and literally drive around their communities where fresh produce is sparse and not readily available. And they continue to do that and never stopped working even when the pandemic started. On the top right screen image, you see this is from Newport News, Virginia, where they retrofitted an RV and offered free showers to those individuals experiencing homelessness, as well as free Wi-Fi services. So you can park there, access their hotspot, and things of that nature. Can you go to the next slide, Ramel? This is a better capture as well. We have 8 EnVision Center sites and hopefully more who also raised their hands and said, I want to be a testing site. So through their local connections, working with their local healthcare providers, they were able to provide testing to the residents and the clients that they serve. So the bottom left image shows a person receiving, a COVID-19 testing in Rome, Georgia, which is located at the EnVision Center site, which happens to be located at the Housing Authority. And then on the top left, you see this is an example of partnering with USDA. In fact, USDA Food Nutrition Services, we worked with them and learned about the Farmers to Families Fresh Box program, and they were able to connect with a food supplier who was willing to deliver and help offer fresh produce to the EnVision Center site and the clients that they serve. And last slide, and I think this is the last slide where we're at, Martin. We can definitely I think Romel has a video that he would like to show, but where we're at with EnVision Center, we continue to promote what we're doing, and we're just trying to expand our ability to serve the EnVision Center sites with our partners. A lot of this, I understand, is conceptual, so I'll let Romel play a video because I think that might be able to help you see how the EnVision Center site actually looks like on the ground, at least in the virtual sense.
Okay.
But Romel.
Yep. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to share my screen with the video. So I'm setting this up. Are there any questions for for Jill or myself?
So we don't have any currently, but I thought maybe if we have a second, if one of you could possibly highlight any partnerships that were made post-COVID to see how, just to show some examples of how we continue to evolve the demonstration even during lockdown.
Yeah, I'll just answer that real quick before we get into this video. One thing that we noticed is, of course, during COVID, we really put our thinking hats on at HUD headquarters and thought, okay, what are the needs that we're seeing in light of the pandemic? And of course, a lot of it, unfortunately, were basic needs. A lot of it was you have families, you have children who need meals, who need food because they relied so heavily on going to school. But where do you get your meals when school was closed? Thus, we pivoted and started connecting with our USDA Food Nutrition Service partners to introduce that food program to our EnVision Center sites who are seeking that kind of resource. And then Romel, I'll tag you in because we also recognize that there's a growing and continues to grow, unfortunately, unemployment rate. So we started working with Department of Labor. And Romel, do you mind sharing a little bit about what we've done with them?
Yeah, so another service that we actually started like prior to the pandemic, but has really picked up a lot is just offering webinars, free webinars to our EnVision centers and other stakeholders, within HUD. So everything from, Department of Labor's apprenticeship program to USDA's like food and nutrition services, in particular the COVID-19 response. And then recently we've also partnered with Health and Human Services, who have done like a very phenomenal job of just, setting up three-part webinar series for EnVision centers as well as other community stakeholders to just learn about best practices of like telehealth and how to deliver it effectively, especially for communities that have accessibility issues. So everything from, just addressing like the digital divide to, how to overcome like the cultural and, linguistic barriers, that are associated with providing good telehealth. And so we've really just ramped up that service because, we also want to promote our federal partners, resources and services. And, how can we do that? So we've, just chosen to just really take this webinar approach and just advertise it, whenever we can, as frequently as we can to our EnVision centers. And we're definitely happy to extend that, those invitations to you all as Promise Zones, because you are definitely serving the same communities in many ways. And I think we've done that in the past, but, if there's a way for us to share that and just partner with you, make sure that you do get those resources, we're happy to do that. So I'm going to play this video. This is from the EnVision Center located in Ponce, Puerto Rico. So in the southern part of Puerto Rico. It's a very quick video, about like a minute and 50 seconds.
We received this designation as a great recognition, but at the same time we receive it with a great sense of responsibility and commitment. We have program for economic development, empowerment, educational advancement, for character and leadership, and also we provide services in the area of health.
Estuve aproximadamente de 5 años trabajando con TANFO, Centro Sol y Solina Ferrer, como empleada, y luego de eso, durante ese periodo, logré tener mi primera casa, tuve mi auto propio gracias a los centros y esa ayuda, ¿verdad?, que recibí de parte de ese programa.
Once I came down and saw the organization, the work that they were doing, I met with their board, I met with the students, I saw their facilities. It wasn't a hard decision at all.
The center was founded as a community health center.
Yo llevo recibiendo los servicios hace como 4 o 5 años, luego de que di a luz de mi primer hijo, lo traje para que entonces fuera atendido aquí en el centro y ahora estoy siendo atendida por lo que es el ginecólogo señor Álvarez.
When we learned that Centro City Sorina was going to be part of the EnVision Center, we more than gladly said that we would be able to provide the healthcare part of the 4 pillars.
Sí, todo ha sido bien, siempre han sido bien cordiales, siempre han sido bien serviciales con los pacientes. Ahora mismo yo tuve una experiencia y me resolvieron súper rápido. Siempre han estado dispuestos para mí siempre.
If we have time, we do have another video, but I just wanted to pause there to see if there's any questions. Okay, I'm gonna play this second video. It's a little shorter. This is from Birmingham, Alabama EnVision Center.
As an EnVision Center here in Birmingham, being the first EnVision Center in the state of Alabama, I'm really proud to get this special designation.
I think there's much more to be able to provide services, connect families to services and opportunities so they can have an experience beyond affordable housing.
It's a blessing. It's a dream come true. So I can start putting money back for retirement and get me a house, take vacation, and help out the community service. And I can let everybody else know around the neighborhood what this class meant to me and how they helped me get this job.
Anytime that we have the ability to uplift people to a different trajectory and a different way of living and an opportunity to excel, that is an opportunity that we should take advantage of. And here in Birmingham, that is what they've done.
It's basically teaching me how to get started myself too, of not being so quiet and get out to learn how to talk to other people.
Well, as a dream, I always say you strive for success to be the best. So I settle for no less. It's not that you can't if you live out here within the 500 units of Martinsville, because you can. All you have to do is get up and walk to it.
Okay. Oops.
Thanks, Ramel. And I guess we'll pass it to Mark. I don't know if you have any additional questions.
Sure, I do. I was wondering if it would be okay before we did that, if I could just speak about Hartford for a minute, since we covered them previously. I had hoped to have Courtney Jackson. He's the Promise Zone Director and also the lead for the EnVision Center in Hartford, but he wasn't able to join us. So I just wanted to speak quickly on Hartford, because they kind of straddle both initiatives. And Hartford had started, at Promise Zone, they were a second round designee, and they had an image problem where, they were receiving lots of federal grants to run, programs and certain things, but they didn't have something that the folks in their neighborhoods could point to and say, that is the Promise Zone. Their youth employment grants were great in helping kids, but the community didn't have a tangible thing for their Promise Zone to point to that says that is the North Hartford Promise Zone. So they started developing this idea for a community hub that would be at Parkville Memorial, which they later applied for and received their EnVision Center designation because it fit so perfectly into what they were looking to do and build that community hub and bring in these resources under one roof and be able to help their residents with anything that they needed. And in doing so, they've been able to bring in not only some new programs and services that we highlighted through the EnVision Center, but got extremely creative and went back to some of those grants that they had received as a promise zone with preference points, and then utilized those funds to build out their EnVision Center infrastructure and some of their programming. Like, they had been a recipient of the Byrne Criminal Justice Grant, which later became the Community-Based Crime Reduction Grant, and utilized those funds to hire a navigator to staff on site, and then also hire at-risk youth in that neighborhood to go out and promote the services and programs that they offer at that EnVision Center, to show, what could be there, and keep, other at-risk youth from going and getting in trouble on the street. And it was just a very creative use of those funds and both designations, I think, to build out their infrastructure there. So I thought that, it would be something that it would be of interest for promise zones to hear to how they took that next step. They actually have a quote from one of their partners that said, if the promise zone was the bride, the EnVision Center was the groom, and that marriage built out perfectly for them, and became kind of, the symbol in the heart of their promise zone and what they could do for the community there. So I do have a couple other questions. So personally, I think the sites serving their communities during the COVID lockdowns illustrates the importance of and spirit of the EnVision Center demonstrations. Do you, or can you highlight any of the virtual services that were being offered by EnVision Centers?
Yeah, I can, and Ramel, feel free to jump in here as well. I would say, so a lot of the virtual services are dependent on whether the EnVision Center site has the capability, of course, as well as the residents. Like, do they have not only the internet connection, the infrastructure in place, but also if they have the devices themselves. So it's really kind of heavily dependent on that one. I like to point out, like, so in Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas, there's actually 2 EnVision Center sites that really straddle that border. They're called the Astein Village. They heavily promote and have always targeted working with youth, especially working with youth on STEM-related information. And so since the pandemic, they quickly pivoted to offering Zoom webinars and as well as Zoom education resources. Recently, we introduced the financial literacy program to the youth. FDIC has a specific youth curriculum. And actually, one of our in-house deputy directors, she has a financial literacy background. And so she received a training, and she literally got on a Zoom call just like this with at least 20 to 30 different youth who have been given access to mobile devices and taught them financial literacy. So that's a perfect example of how they've had to pivot to that kind of outreach and deliverable in light of COVID. And Ramel, I don't know if you want to share if you know of any other examples, but that one was one of my favorites because it was, just financial literacy continues to be an important issue, especially for those customers who are unbanked, and really educating youth early on about the resources and how to start a bank account, how to make sure their savings, all of that is really important.
Yeah, so I would just add that, one initiative that we had started, prior to the pandemic, unfortunately, starting was that the AmeriCorps Vista. So that's a service that, we've been able to just really solidify with the Corporation for National and Community Service to try to get a Vista in place at these EnVision centers. And so now because of the pandemic, in some ways they're going to be working actually remotely. And so, but that is still a really great resource because they can help the EnVision Center, still apply for grants, identify other community partners, possibly set up federal roundtables, things like that, to really just help the EnVision Center and their community and their clients, despite what's happening, a lot of the work can still be replicated, remotely.
Thank you both. Jake in Minneapolis had a comment about, being out as a community liaison, being out in the community several times a week, and have offices where partners and stakeholders know where they can find us. I just wanted to add to Jake's comment that one of the first things that Hartford did when they received their EnVision Center designation is move all of their meetings from City Hall out to their EnVision Center at Parker Memorial, and had all the partners go there, and it became home base. And it was, we meet in the Promise Zone, we do the work in the Promise Zone, we're here for the EnVision Center, our partners are meeting here to build out the services and programs in this building, and some of them are going to expand beyond the walls of this building, but this is home now. So to your point, Jake, that is exactly what Hartford did, and it, I think, was a huge symbolic change for them that got a lot of buy-in from their partners. So my next question is, I have a two-parter. Part of it is from Eric Yost. He says that Promise Zones have strategic goals and objectives and data and metrics to measure success. What are the metrics for EnVision Centers to measure success? And if there are any requirements for HUD tracking EnVision Center data or EnVision Centers themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Eric, I wish you would ask me that internally, actually, as a HUD colleague, but so I appreciate the data related question. So as a requirement of the EnVision Center, it's actually very minimal. They are expected to submit only quarterly reports that track just the number of visits to each site and any new developments of partners or any dissolution of partners. So it's very basic, to be quite frank. We are in the process of actually looking to see what kind of metrics we can seek from the EnVision Center sites based on what they've submitted in those quarterly reports. And we've actually engaged the help of the Library of Congress to help us conduct that type of evaluation. And the reason why we're doing that now is because the EnVision Center is strictly a demonstration. It's literally a pilot. We wanted to see, first of all, was there any interest? There's 52 and growing who are interested in being part of the demonstration. And then also just doing kind of a basic, what are their current tracking methods? Are they triaging? Are they collecting data directly from the clients that enter and seek services? And then how are they actually following the clients in when they receive services? How do we know that the services in fact led to how they would result and how it would lead to positive outcomes to them? But I do think that there's always an opportunity. In fact, we're trying to figure out, so after the Library of Congress evaluation, we want to also seek and learn from Promise Zones, for instance, how have you all conducted your evaluation? Can we glean lessons learned from you all so that we can inform the strategy? And I will just add one more, one thing. Clearly, I'm very passionate about this one because it's one thing to bring services to the EnVision Center site or to any place-based work. It's important to make sure that it's well received, first of all, and it adds value to the individual, to the end user, the customer that we ultimately are serving, which is the public. Will it actually help you achieve your goals if I introduce financial literacy services, if I introduce tax counseling services to you? And we're trying to identify specific outcomes, standard outcomes under each of the 4 pillars to make sure that we are not only bringing in the services, but like I said, that service will lead to positive health outcomes, positive education outcomes, positive economic outcomes or job related, and of course, positive character and leadership, which we're still actually kind of struggling to figure out what does character and leadership really mean? Because it means differently in each community, but that grittiness, that mentorship, that professional savviness. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
So we don't have any other questions at this time. I guess we can do a last call for questions from folks before we conclude. Looks like that's it. big thanks to Jill and Ramel for an excellent presentation and for all the information. And thank you for Julius and everyone here at the convening for allowing us to speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Mark.
All right, take care. Enjoy the rest of the convening.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, thank you all. On behalf of the National Coalition of Promise Zones and especially the planning team for the federal convening, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I hope that the information that you learned was helpful. And I also hope that you join us during some future presentations. There will be 14 more presentations during the convening, and we hope to see you. All right, thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful day.